Well, here we are. This is my second attempt to review Masters of the Universe Revelation Part 1. In the previous video, I said I was going to spend some time reminiscing about my memories of the He-Man franchise and then move into talking about Part 1 of Revelation. But I spent too much time reminiscing about my memories of He-Man, and by the time I was done reminiscing, the 27 minutes had passed and it was time to finish the video. So I'm going to try and avoid that same problem this time. I'm going to just jump right into it. A few brief disclaimers I want to get out of the way. When I mentioned in my previous video that I was struggling with a bit of a cold, unfortunately, the cold's not gotten better. In fact, it got worse over the past couple days, which is why I didn't film this video yesterday. My intent had been to follow up that failed video immediately with this video reviewing Revelation Part 1. But I just couldn't talk yesterday. And you can hear it in my voice maybe. I'm struggling today. Just kind of barely, I've almost lost my voice. I'm barely hanging on to my voice. So I've got a cough drop right now. I'm also going to be drinking hot beverages. If I was a perfectionist, I would delay filming this review until I was completely recovered, but you never know when that's going to be, and by the time I get completely recovered, there'll be other stuff to review, so I'm just going to plow ahead. Yeah, winter is rough. This is something, moving back to the United States, I guess I just didn't appreciate is how much of winter I would feel sick during and be coughing and have colds during. And boy, is this going to mess with my YouTube hobby. It might. We'll see how many of my winter reviews end up sounding sick, but it is what it is. The other thing is, as I mentioned in the previous video, I've decided to split Masters of the Universe Revelation Season 1 into two reviews because Netflix itself split it into two parts and it seems like it's meant to be consumed in two different chunks. So I have actually seen all 10 episodes of Season 1 at this point. I haven't seen Season 2. I've seen all 10 episodes of Season 1, but I'm going to try and primarily focus on the first 5 episodes of Part 1 of Masters of the Universe Revelation. Okay, so there's a couple angles to this maybe. And the first angle is, how well does this work as a sequel / continuation of the original Masters of the Universe franchise? It was widely reported when this came out that this was a direct sequel to the 1980s cartoon. And in fact, before filming this review, I was revisiting some of the reviews on the internet written by other people. And some of those reviews, like in the review by the AV Club, they go ahead and state directly, this is a direct continuation of the He-Man TV series. Now, a caveat often made in these claims is that this is a direct continuation ignoring She-Ra. So it's pretending that the She-Ra stuff never happened. Which, you know, if you grew up during the 80s, that's problem number one, because that She-Ra show totally happened, right? I mean, we all remember the show, we all remember the toy line. I mean, if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna do a direct continuation of the show, then let's go back to the original material and don't forget about She-Ra. So, but anyways, it was marketed as a direct continuation of the show, assuming that the She-Ra stuff was not canon, had never happened. But even if you make exceptions with the She-Ra stuff not happening, there were a number of things which began to strike me as odd as I watched this show. So characters had powers I don't remember them having in the cartoon. And as I talked about my history in the previous video, Granted, I'm not as intimately familiar with the cartoon as other people of my generation. But I don't remember Skeletor and Evil Lyn being able to teleport everywhere. Did they have that power in the cartoon? Am I forgetting it? Also, Beastman, when he does show up, doesn't seem to be in line with his appearance from the 1980s Filmation cartoons, in which he was kind of a sniveling, whimpering bad guy. He seems... Sorry, he was a sniveling, whimpering type henchman, like one of these evil henchmen who's always screwing up and getting yelled at by the boss, which was popular in cartoons at the time. The Beastman in the Netflix series seems more in line with the Beastman in the 2002 He-Man Revival cartoon, where he was portrayed as kind of like a ferocious beast. And if you look at the character design, you can see where, okay, the character design does look like a ferocious beast, but that's not how he was portrayed in the original 1980s cartoon. And then there is a character of Roboto, who I didn't remember at all. But if you've seen the Netflix Revelation TV show, oh, and by the way, spoilers. I'm going to spoil everything as I go through this. He has a major part in, I think, episodes 3 and 4. The middle episodes, he's got a major part in them. And it's talked about how he's Man-at-Arms' son, and Man-at-Arms created him and transferred his consciousness into him. I thought, was that story established in the original cartoon? So I Googled, or I went to Wikipedia to look up Roboto. You know, the thing looking anything up on Wikipedia is it's very apparent very quickly that these characters all have such convoluted histories. Because in addition to them appearing in the cartoon, there's like a few comics that appeared before the cartoon, or there's a comics that appeared in the toy packaging. So there's like the comic book origin, the origin that was explained in the toy packaging, and the origin in the cartoon. And that's even before you get into all the later reboots. So then there's a 2002 reboot and the classic toy line reboot, and of course now we've got the Netflix one. So each character has like 6 different incarnations with different origins in each of them. So this is bugging me. I'm gonna try and center this. So it's a little bit of a headache to sort through it all if you're not a super fan. But it looked like Roboto's origin story in the cartoon was different, in the 1980s cartoon was different as he was being portrayed in Netflix Revelation. So I actually did a little bit of research on this. I didn't do massive in-depth research in preparation for this review, but I did go back and watch the original episode from the 1980s cartoon in which Roboto makes his first and only appearance. Because you can watch them all on YouTube. All the old Masters of the Universe episodes from the 80s are on YouTube. It was called Happy Birthday Roboto. And the origin was totally different. In that version, Roboto comes from another planet. He's visiting Eternia on his space shuttle. He gets repaired by Man-at-Arms, but he's not created by Man-at-Arms. He doesn't contain Man-at-Arms consciousness. And he's not Man-at-Arms' son. So at that point, I just started viewing Masters of the Universe Revelation as not a continuation of the TV show as it was advertised as, but as just another reboot. Now, in doing some research again for this review, I came across an interesting video by Midnight's Edge, in which he actually parses through all this and reveals that despite the fact that it was marketed as a sequel to the cartoon, it was not, because they didn't have the rights to the cartoon. So there's the toys, which are owned by Mattel, and the cartoon, which was created by Filmation. Filmation no longer exists, but the rights to that old cartoon are owned by whoever has the rights to Filmation. The rights to the cartoon and the rights to the toy line are different, in other words. And Kevin Smith and the guys at the guys at Masters of the Universe Revelations for Netflix only had the rights to the toy line. So they could bring in characters and character traits and plot elements only so far as it could plausibly be argued that these are from the toy line rather than the cartoon. And Midnight's Edge even pointed to a tweet from Kevin Smith where he was saying very directly, we consider ourselves a spiritual sequel to the 1980s cartoon. But we can't actually say this is a direct sequel to the 1980s cartoon because we don't have the rights. It's based on the toy line. But that tweet aside, this was something that the studio tried to keep out of the spotlight. Midnight's Edge argues that the studios don't like it when these rights issues become public knowledge. And in fact, speaking in terms of just nostalgia appeal, part of the reason I wanted to watch this in the first place is because it had been advertised in so many places as the direct sequel to the 1980s cartoon, which I grew up with, have nostalgia for, as I talked about in the previous video. If I had known this was just another reboot of Masters of the Universe, I might well have given it a pass. And at this point in time, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on to season 2 at this point. I wasn't that impressed by Masters of the Universe Revelation. There were parts of it which worked well, but there were parts of it which didn't, to kind of give a little preview of where my review is going ultimately once I get around to it. So that's one issue. It was marketed as a direct sequel to the cartoon, but it wasn't. They only had the rights to the toy, so it was kind of it's best kind of treated as yet another reboot of the franchise. Although, yeah, they do kind of leave some doors open for you to consider this a sequel to the cartoon. Kind of starting off with pre-established characters instead of establishing the characters. Episode 1 just assumes you're already familiar with these characters, etc. But the other thing, excuse me, there's that cough. The other big issue around this whole thing was the whole little controversy it generated online about how the whole thing was woke. And I want to say assume everyone's familiar with this controversy, but maybe everyone's not. I don't know. Maybe it's just us terminally online people who are aware of all this stuff. But there were a number of anti-woke grifters who made several videos complaining about how Netflix's He-Man was too woke back in 2021. And their main objections was that in the first 5 episodes, the character of He-Man was nowhere to be seen. And we're focusing instead on the story of Teela. And Teela is made to be more powerful than any of the male characters. And all the female characters are given prominence and the male characters are sidelined. Now, if you know anything about the anti-woke grifters, you know it's kind of a grift. They get their views by pretending to be upset about stuff that they don't actually care about. That because anger generates interest and generates views, they tend to make a lot of money this way, but it's all a bit of a act. Movie Bob did a good video on this controversy, and I'll try and remember to link to all the stuff I talk about in the description down below. But Movie Bob said, look, it's ridiculous. These guys are just doing it for clicks. This is obviously a grift. And he said, he said it's a little silly to even engage in this controversy because the whole thing's a facade. But he said if you do want to make dissect it and make an argument for it, you can make the argument that this is a very intelligent way to do the third season, what is being advertised as the third season of He-Man, again because it's a sequel to the 1980s cartoon, which had 2 seasons. He said you can make an argument that's a very intelligent way to do a third season because what's a character that has an unresolved arc that never got resolved on the TV show, right? It's Teela, right? She doesn't know who her parents are. She's always trying to figure out who her mother is. And the cartoon ends without ever having resolved that. Because that's the way TV worked in the 1980s. Nothing ever changed from episode to episode. So I don't believe that even if they had gotten renewed for a third season, they would have resolved that arc because nothing ever got resolved back in those days. But anyways, Movie Bob seems to think that that's what probably would have been the focus had He-Man been renewed for a third season, and it was a logical thing to make this the focus of the new series on. I thought that was a very intelligent argument. I don't know what you guys think about Movie Bob. I tend to really like his analysis and his breakdowns of themes and trends and kind of what's going on behind the scenes and why stuff is written the way it is, etc. I think all of that is very intelligent. I do, however, think he gets overly impressed by mediocre content. I guess that would be my criticism of him. When I was first discovering him, he gave rave reviews to a number of things that I thought were just going to be awesome because he had talked them out so much. And then I saw them, and they were not nearly as impressive as he had said they were. I think he's too easily impressed. And I mentioned that because he went on in that review to say Masters of the Universe Revelation was awesome and had all these characters doing awesome things. And I thought, well, okay, I liked your analysis of why they went with the Teela thing, but wasn't that awesome? There was some room for improvement here. But get around to maybe a bit of that later, depending on how my timing goes here. But I was mentioning earlier how the anti-woke grift is a grift, but perhaps there's another angle to it that you're also familiar with. That it's rumored that studios are beginning to take the anti-woke grifters into their marketing strategy. And again, maybe you've heard this rumor online as well. The studios will intentionally do things like put women in prominent positions or put minorities in prominent positions because they're trying to bait the anti-woke grifters into going off about it for 10 videos on YouTube. And then that will generate free publicity for the studios. So there's a little bit of a song and dance being played on both games here. The anti-woke grifters are pretending to be upset about something they're not really upset about. But the studios are actually intentionally putting in stuff that they know is going to get the anti-woke grifters fodder for complaints so that they can generate free publicity. I mention that because I was watching this and I thought, oh, okay. I know those anti-woke grifters are full of shit, but that the studio has got to be baiting them on this. I mean, there's just kind of everything they love to complain about is in here. I can't imagine. I know the studio and Kevin Smith and everyone just likes to say, oh, we just wanted to make a movie. We just wanted to make a TV series, and everyone complained about it and being so mean to us. And we had no idea they were going to complain about it. But you look at this and you're like, yo, okay. It's 2021. You guys knew they were going to complain about this. Like, this has to be intentional, right? They were just so blatantly baiting those anti-woke grifters. So, first 5 episodes which were released by Netflix. And at the time this came out, this was all that came out, right? That you didn't get to see the second 5 episodes for several months later. He-Man is entirely sidelined. He's off, presumably dead, for most of the series. We get Teela and a cast full of women. Teela has, I guess the anti-woke grifters call this a Mary Sue thing, where she's in the land of the dead and she's doing all these awesome things and getting powers, which you're like, okay, where did that come from? How does she do that? She was never this awesome in the original cartoon. And then the supporting cast is all of their women. And they took characters that were originally white in the original franchise and changed the race of them. Which, okay, I mean, you could make the argument that that's good that they're doing this for diversity, etc. But they must know that stuff the anti-woke grifters are going to complain about. And this is He-Man. This is a nerd franchise. This is where the anti-woke grifters live, right? This is their home base for them, is content like this. This is not like they're taking some sort of property that's outside the realm of where these anti-woke grifters typically operate. So it's, to me, the whole thing seemed like a little bit of a song and dance, but okay. I know. It's 22 minutes into this review, and I haven't really properly gotten into reviewing it. I thought the first 5 episodes were okay, but not great. So the action scenes were okay. Now, one of the things that with the original, I don't think I talked about this in my previous video, but the original He-Man, oh, maybe I did talk about this. Anyways, the original He-Man, he wasn't supposed to punch anyone. It depends a little bit what source you read. Either it was outright prohibited from punching, or it was frowned upon him punching. But he wasn't supposed to punch or hit anyone with his, he wasn't supposed to punch anyone with his hands or strike anyone with his sword, because it was, kids' TV at the time, you weren't supposed to show that kind of violence. So he would, instead of punching the bad guy, he would punch the ground next to the bad guy to knock him off base. Instead of using his sword to strike the bad guy, he would use his sword to cut the rope and then have like the light fall down on the bad guy. That kind of stuff was all over the old cartoon. So as a number of reviewers have commented, it's interesting just to see the characters fight, because we never got to see that in the old cartoon. Now, we did get to see it in the 2002 reboot. So I don't know, it's not completely new, but we get to see it here. And it's... I tend to think these fight scenes have gotten a little bit too much praise. They're okay. Some of them are interesting and exciting to watch. Some of these fight scenes, though, and I think I would classify the ones in the first episode in this category, are just kind of people jumping around. There's some interesting choreography going on, but I never really got excited. There was never really a big sense of adrenaline or tension with these fight scenes. Now granted, to truly get something exciting, that's difficult to do. But anyways, we have the first episode. Moss Man from the original franchise appears just to get killed off immediately, which caused some fans to react adversely to it. I read one reviewer, I can't remember where this was, unfortunately, but I read one reviewer who said, Okay, don't tell me you guys are complaining about Mossman. I mean, who even cares about Mossman? And I have to admit, I didn't remember Mossman at all. I think I vaguely remembered the toy. I remember the toy commercials. I didn't really remember Mossman from the cartoon. Although, as I said in the previous episodes, my access to that cartoon was restricted growing up. So I didn't see every single episode like some of my peers did. But I Googled it, watched some clips of Mossman from the old cartoon on YouTube. He seemed like kind of a cool character. After I kind of discovered who he was, I kind of retrospectively regretted that they killed him off so quickly. But it wasn't just the idea that Mossman was everyone's fan's favorite, so that they're upset that they killed him off. At least not to me. It was the idea that here's this character who you only bring onto screen for the purpose of killing him off. Because, you know, the thing with the Masters of the Universe franchise, like I talked about in my previous video, is it had so many different weird and wonderful characters in it. And that's kind of the draw of the franchise, right? Right? Those of us who grew up with it. And so the way to make an interesting Masters of the Universe TV show, I think, would be to bring in that diversity of really weird and wonderful characters. Not just bring in the character only to have immediately killed him off. I mean, I'm not against killing off characters if it serves the story or will fill a dramatic function or something like that, but do something with the character first. You know, showcase him in a couple episodes before you kill him off or something. And this is going to be, throughout the whole series, all 10 episodes of Masters of the Universe Revelation, it's going to be a reoccurring thing that the writers of the show do, is just bring in this character and then kill him off. Which I don't think is... Well, I mean, what's the point of that? But I think they could have used these characters more. So anyways, He-Man and Skeletor appear to get killed off. Of course, they're not really. And then the rest of the episodes focus on Teela. Teela is accompanied by a woman called Lieutenant Andra, who I'd never heard of before. And again, I was wondering, why are they focusing so much on this new character when there are all these characters in the Masters of the Universe franchise? Although a little bit of research reveals that she's not a new character. She was actually in the comics, in the Star Comics back in the 1980s. Never showed up in the cartoon, but was a prominent character in the comics, apparently, where she was Teela's friend. Now, this is one of the characters that they changed the race of. She was originally white in the comics. They made her black in the TV show, although I didn't know that because I never read the comics, and I assume most people didn't know that unless you're a huge super fan. I'm almost out of time. I've got a 30-minute time limit on these videos before they shut off. So I don't really have a lot of time to complain about the whole trip to the land of the dead in Subternia, and then the land of heaven in Preternia. Didn't really make any sense. I mean, I don't know if this is something that was inherited from the comic books or another franchise, but that Preternia didn't make any sense. It was heaven, but yet it seemed like there was still danger in heaven. Like people were still afraid of dying. And in fact, Roboto did die. I'm like, okay, well, you die if you go to heaven. What happens if you die in heaven? The whole cosmology of this didn't seem to be well worked out. And the trips to Subternia and Preternia, I don't know. You've got to be a really good writer to mess around with spirituality in a children's cartoon and to have it really work. And I'm not sure it works. And I did read that these characters were characters that they were going to use for a third season of He-Man and decided not to, like the characters of Hero and King Grayskull and stuff like that. So maybe there's some history behind these characters, but okay. I'm out of time. Next video.